They're finally fucking, which I thought would happen sooner, but here we are. I'm finding it weirdly entertaining. What kind of kink does this serve? I am just astonished. And don't get me started on how she doesn't wear underwear because she doesn't like it. Oh, to have magic purple eyes and a magic pussy. GOTHIKANA. Oh my gosh. Hello friends, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. Today we are going to be starting the first episode of a series of videos that I'm hoping to do where I read romantasy books. Romantasy has definitely been on the rise in the past few years, and I know there's a lot of popular romantasy books out there that I've either read or have not liked, but I do know that there are some out there that would potentially pique my interest. I've also been finding that I've been reading a lot of romance recently in the past year, but I haven't read a lot of fantasy in recent years. So I kind of want to get back into fantasy, and I feel like going through romantasy might be the way to do it. Obviously, I know some of these romantasies are not going to be the level of fantasy and awesomeness of fantasy that I usually love, but the hope is that I can provide you guys with an entertaining experience while I read these books, and also just get the down low on what the hype is for these romantasy books. Now, when talking about romantasy, I do know that the appeal for many people is the smut and spicy scenes that go on in a lot of romantasy books, and the book I'm going to be reading for this vlog is definitely of that variety. It is on the smutty, spicy, erotic side, and since we're on the topic, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is Bellesa. I've talked about Bellesa multiple times on my channel, so you guys know I actually do really love their products, and my friends at Bellesa and I are doing a huge giveaway, so definitely listen to the end. Bellesa is a bi-woman company for all things sexual wellness, and I have to say they make the best vibrators that I've ever used. Now let me show you three of their products that I own and absolutely adore and use on rotation. The first one that I have is the Pebble, and it comes in this super cute carrying case, which is one of the things I love about Bellesa because it's super discreet, and if you had this like in your purse or in your like nightstand or whatever, no one would actually know what it is from the outside. It kind of looks like a makeup compact, but this is the Pebble. It's super small, fits perfectly in your hand, and what I love about it is that the suction and the vibration are controlled independently. It doesn't have like annoying pattern modes, and it's honestly such a small little thing but packs a powerful punch. And then next I have the Air Vibe, and this one's really great because it can do G-spot and clit dual stimulation. Despite how powerful this one is, it is very silent, it's very quiet, so that's also a really great plus. Unlike most of Bellesa's sex toys, this one is waterproof and also rechargeable. And then saving the best for last, I have the Thump, and this is the toy that actually does it all. It vibrates, it suctions, and it thumps. As you can see here, it's got two sides to it, which are really convenient, and it's perfectly designed to be the replacement for all external clit stimulation. So yeah, overall these three are fantastic. They come in clutch in any situation that you have in three different ways. So my friends at Bellesa and I are doing a huge giveaway that you definitely don't want to miss out on. We're literally giving away free vibrators and gift cards for vibrators if you sign up for the giveaway down below using the link in my description. Literally everyone will win something in the giveaway, so you do not want to miss out on it, so go sign up at the link down below. Thank you so much to Bellesa for sponsoring today's video, and now let's talk about the book that I'm going to be reading for this romantasy vlog. Now I know there's a lot of classic romantasies that are out there that honestly I haven't read and that I don't care to read anyways. I read Sarah J. Maas way back when, and I did try to read From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, but that was just a hot mess and I couldn't get pretty far into it. But my intention with this series is to actually find romantasy books that I enjoy. So I'm picking up the ones that seem genuinely interesting to me, not just the popular ones, and ones that are also hopefully by authors of color. Today's one, I'm not sure if the author is an author of color because they do go by a pen name, and I don't believe they have their face up anywhere, but they are very popular and they do have a lot of self-published books. So I think that's quite interesting. And this book in particular caught my interest because of the premise. And the book I'm talking about is GOTHIKANA by Rue Nix. I saw this cover and I was like, wow, this is a really pretty cover. It also looks super dark and romantic, and I feel like that's kind of the vibe I want right now. Basically how I stumbled upon this was that I was just browsing around on kobo.com. I was looking for an ebook to read and one to grab, and this one just sort of surfaced among my recommendations, but then I realized it was actually super popular on booktok. And then of course the main hook sentence of the description just really caught my interest, so I'm gonna read it out to you. So GOTHIKANA is described as the eternal romance of Beauty and the Beast meets the gothic suspense of Dracula in this erotic dark academia story of an epic love from best-selling author Rue Nix. Can we just take a moment to take that in? Eternal romance, Beauty and the Beast, Dracula, erotic dark academia? Like, what does that even mean? And epic love, obviously, because this is a romantasy. I'm personally a sucker for anything that is like Beauty and the Beast related or like Hades and Persephone related. I feel like it's such an interesting dynamic, and also one that's really great for like sort of dark romance situations. And I'm also intrigued by the fact that this says dark academia. I feel like it's not actually going to be very much dark academia. I feel like it's just going to be a school-ish situation, and they've just called it dark academia because it's dark and the person is in school, but it's not actually like dark academia. I'm also intrigued by the whole Dracula comparison, because I actually don't know if this book has like vampires or not, or if it's just like sort of relating to the idea of like Dracula and this immortal person and like Dracula's brides and that kind of thing. I did start the book on my e-reader this morning on my Kobo Libra Color, and I was actually using these stylus to like mark up the book as well, because I don't know, there was just something about the writing style and just the things that were happening that I was like, oh my god, I just want to like leave a little note here. So I just ended up starting to annotate it, which is like totally out of character for me because I don't usually like to stop while I'm reading to like do that type of stuff. But this book, I feel like, because it's a romantasy, because I'm not super invested, and because I'm just sort of looking at it from a sort of removed position, I feel like it's just fun to comment on it along the way. It's like just giving my commentary basically. So with my e-reader settings and the font size, this book is 965 pages. Obviously I have like really big font here, so it's actually not that long. And I'm already 49 pages in, and I only read for like, I think half an hour to an hour this morning. So far from what I've gathered, the main character does definitely have that self-insert type of lack of character ish vibe, something that is very familiar to me from like back in my fanfic days. But I am intrigued by the situation. There is a chapter at the beginning, I think from the guy's perspective, Vad, and it's when he's a child, and this old woman basically predicts that he's gonna live in like a castle at some point and be very alone. And then we jump multiple years later to the main character Corvina when she's young, and she has her mother around, and they have just been sort of isolated from everyone around them. And then after that we really jump far forward to when the story actually starts, and our main character Corvina has received this letter as like an acceptance into this academy, I think, or university, and she is in a taxi and she's going up the mountain or something. So right now, so far, the book feels a little bit simple, especially in the way that the writing style is, but I can see how I may get invested in the whole situation. And I'm also really intrigued by the whole like erotic part and whether it's actually going to be good. I feel like I've read some really great smut over the past few months, and so my standards have gotten higher, but we'll see how this one goes. From the get-go, this one's also giving me a lot of vibes of like Fourth Wing. I have tried to pick up Fourth Wing and I got through, I think, 30% of it, and then I lost interest completely. So this book sort of starts in a similar way in the sense that like she's going to the school, just like the main character in Fourth Wing, though there's less of this like ominous sense of like, you know, she could die or whatever, like the Hunger Games kind of vibe or Divergent kind of vibe that Fourth Wing had. But yeah, like I said, the main character feels very self-insert-y just because we don't really know much about her personality so far. She seems very calm and timid, and she was homeschooled by her mother, who seems to be this really weird old woman. Corvina has like these purple eyes, and you know, there's obviously some sort of fantasy element with that. But what I find really funny about the world building of this book so far is that it's set in our real world and current day, I think, and there's computers and whatever else, but it seems like at the academy the signal is not great, and like a lot of these things don't work, so it feels as if they're taking them back in time, which I think is just odd, especially if you're setting it in like our real world day to day. I feel like my gut reaction is to be really critical, but I'm gonna try to let it go a bit and just enjoy the ride. Anyways, that's my update. I will come back to you once I'm further into the book. All right, so I am about 12% into GOTHIKANA. I am past the end of chapter 3, and out of 965 pages on my e-reader, I am at page 128. So unlike what I was actually hoping for this book, it seems to be very much in this sort of fan fiction-y, cliche, cringy, vibe for the most part. The main character has become besties with this girl named Jade, who is now her roommate, and like she immediately starts referring to her as her friend after like just meeting her only maybe an hour ago. So that was weird, and she also agrees to become Jade's roommate like immediately without knowing anything about her. And it's sort of explained as if Corvina has this like magical ability to sense if someone is a good person or not, which to me just seems like a cop-out way to not really build up relationships. So the whole friendship thing is a little weird and doesn't really make sense. But then Jade is also like sort of this gossipy person who is like telling her all of these details rather than like the main character finding these things out. And she tells her about how her old roommate, who had apparently jumped off the top of the castle, had previously been hooking up with this professor who's not actually a professor. He's actually like a PhD student or something. Like he's finishing his dissertation, but he was taking on some classes. His name is Mr. Deverell, and it's obviously Thad, or, you know, the guy from the beginning of the book. But yeah, apparently they were sleeping together, and then she goes and jumps off the castle. So it's like all really strange, and it's so cringy the way that some of the descriptions are written and the dialogue is written. Like Jade is like, oh, you know, he's so hot, whatever. And he has a strand of silver hair in his hair, and it's just like really working for him. Another thing that's just like really annoying me is that like they call him the silver-eyed devil as like sort of a nickname, and he's like someone you should watch out for, but like honestly he's just another man. She's starting one of her first classes, and it's like an English lit class, and he is the teacher. Everyone in the room senses like the sexual tension between him and the main character because he's staring at her like super intensely, which is like such a fanfiction-y thing. And don't get me wrong, I love fanfiction. I wrote fanfiction, so I'm not here to diss fanfiction, but fanfiction can be cringy, and this is very cringy. And then in that same scene, Corvina is just like, oh my god, like he's looking at me. And this is like the first time I've felt lust with a real man and not a fictional one. And it's just so cringy. Like this is obviously the fantasy of someone who read books growing up and has never experienced anything else. Like this is what they want. This is the fantasy that they would love to have. But there is like the mystery element going on, and there's also mention that there's like this black ball that happens like every 5 years, and Jade is like, someone always goes missing. So it remains to be seen what's gonna happen later. In the author's note at the beginning of the book, there is like mention of gruesome things that happen on page. So I'm curious to see how much detail she goes into when describing those things later on in the book and how dark the book might get. Another thing that's just weird about this book is that all of the like kids or like people who are going to this college at the castle, they're all people who are like down on their luck or are foster kids or whatever. And obviously like there's absolutely no characterization of anyone, and people are just sort of mentioned in passing. There was one black girl mentioned. Her name's Erica. She seemed cool, I guess, but like the one thing that she says is, oh, I could like feel the sexual tension between you and Mr. Deverell or whatever his name is. So yeah, overall this is not shaping up to be all that good, but I'm finding it weirdly entertaining because it's so cringy. And I'm also just curious to see like the train wreck continue to happen. Like it's so bad that I can't look away. Anyways, I will update you when I'm further in, but so far romantasy's not doing great. Okay, so it's many hours later and I am 24% into GOTHIKANA, and I must say I have to eat some of my words from earlier. It has definitely gotten better, and I think that's partly due to the fact that the author is better at writing some things than she is with other things. So I feel like introducing characters wasn't that great, and I do feel like this whole trope of the main character being like the innocent girl who doesn't know anything is really overdone. And don't get me started on how she doesn't wear underwear because she doesn't like it. But a couple things that the author is doing well now in the book is one, the mystery of the book and sort of like the darkness of it and how it's kind of creepy. There are more secrets about the school that the main character starts to learn, and there's like these different rumors that really starts to amp up some of the intrigue and excitement of the book. I'm definitely like way more interested now, and I want to know where it's gonna go. I do feel like she is starting to build the tension between the characters a little bit better. It's just the dialogue, I think, is what ruins it. The stuff that they say is just like absurd, and sometimes the stuff that like the main character says in her head is just like, oh my god, this is so cringe. The other thing about this is that it's technically a dark academia. I'm starting to see it a little bit more because of all the secret rumors and the sort of mystery and darkness that's surrounding the school and the talk of like all these debts and that kind of thing. But in terms of like actual academia, there's like nothing, zilch, zero. I just feel like the author is just falling into these like really cringy tropes and traps, and that's what's like pulling me out of the story. But otherwise, I'm interested, I'm intrigued. And then the last thing that I want to talk about at this particular moment is that there is like this hint of fantasy elements, in the sense that the main character is hearing these voices and sees these strange things. And I'm really curious to see where that's going to go, because it's also framed as her potentially having some sort of mental illness, because she talks about having gone to like a doctor and receiving treatment. So yeah, there are layers to this character, and sometimes she has like some great comebacks. Actually has a thought that I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. But then she devolves into like this sort of lustful mess when she's around the love interest. She also just turns into this like trope of like the innocent girl who needs to be corrupted by the dark, mysterious man. Okay, it's the next day, and I thought I would update you while I do my makeup. So, GOTHIKANA, oh my gosh. Like I said in my last update, it's definitely starting to get better, in the sense that like the mystery elements, the spookiness, all of that I'm really, really enjoying. Although there's still small little cliched moments, and there's generally this theme of the main character saying like, oh, I want him to claim me, possess me, and all of this nonsense. The overall mystery is just really interesting, and I like just want to know what's gonna happen. I'm really curious. I feel like there's a lot of backstory. The two main characters, they start to open up to each other a little bit more, and at this point it's starting to feel more like a believable romance. I think the element of the, you know, initial lust and attraction is what's irritating, in the sense that it feels very insta-lovey or insta-lusty, and just like, I don't know, unnecessarily dramatic. Like, yes, we get it. You both think each other is hot, but you know, get on with your lives. So yesterday was Friday, and I did end up reading a little bit late into the night. Well, late for me because I usually sleep at like 9 or 10 because I'm a grandma, and I get up really early for the gym in the morning. But I did continue reading until like midnight, even though I had been up since like 5 a.m. yesterday. And it's honestly been a while since I've like stayed up to read a book, because I don't know, I just feel like I haven't been reading as much these past couple months. I'm trying to get back into more reading, but also I feel like it takes a lot for me to want to stay up to read these days, because of my schedule and the way that I'm always up early, but also because I feel like I haven't been that engrossed in a book in a while. And lo and behold, GOTHIKANA is doing that for me, which is partly surprising, but also like exactly what I was hoping for. So here we are. And if you're wondering, yes, I am doing my makeup on the ground in my living room, because I still haven't figured out a permanent place for doing my makeup. I'm still like pulling my shit out of a box because I just moved and life is chaotic. Anyways, one part I did get around to was like the first major sex scene between the two main characters, and we've been sort of building up to this, and I think I'm like 50% through the book, or almost 50, like 45%. So they're finally fucking, which I thought would happen sooner, but here we are. And the funny thing about it was that it was like super predictable that it was gonna come, because they end up getting like stuck in this storm, and they have to like stop in between as they go up this mountain back to the castle. Obviously they're alone, and so he's like, you know, maybe we just fuck now and get it out of our systems kind of thing. No one's around, no one will know. And then of course our main character has never had sex before, and so she's like experiencing everything for the first time, and he has like a dick that's the size of like a water bottle, absolutely outrageously large, and she's just taking it all in and like immediately knows what to do in the situation, which is just absolutely absurd. And they're doing it in the car in the rain, and then the rain stops, and then they switch positions, and he's very like gruff and commanding, you could say, but some of the stuff that they both say is just like outrageous, and I will find a quote for you later to read out. But one thing that is bothering me whenever we get to like one of these lustful sexual scenes is that the main character always relates it back to how the romance books that she's been reading could not prepare her for this, or she never expected that the way that the heroines get treated in romance books would ever happen to her. And I don't know, I feel like one of my biggest pet peeves, and this is like such a stupid thing to find annoying, especially because I'm such a reader, but what is my pet peeve in books is especially when there is the very highly obvious book obsessed main character, introverted character, who is saying the whole like, books were my savior, they helped me through everything, they're all the experience that I have in life, yada yada yada. I know it's meant to be relatable because like most of the people who are picking up any book are probably like avid readers, but I think what bothers me is that it's starts to feel like the main character is some sort of self-insert and doesn't have much of a personality beyond that. Like, I find I like characters who are very different from me or have some sort of eccentric trait to them, or are just like interesting, they have flaws. Whereas when I'm faced with a character who essentially has had not many experiences in their lives and is basically like a sponge soaking up whatever happens in the book or, you know, the traits of the other characters around them, it just ends up being kind of boring to me. Like, they don't feel like they have enough agency to me. So yeah, my pet peeve is like that line in a lot of books where the main character is like, I lived between the pages of a book, or I never expected this to happen to me like it does in the books that I've read. I know that makes me sound like an awful person, but it's just how I feel. Like, I just want something more intriguing and interesting. But I will make the caveat, similar to what I said, I think in my last update, that Corvina is starting to seem like more of a person with more layers. I think the element of her mother being in a psychiatric institute was a bit interesting. It added some layer to her character and how she's triggered by the word crazy when people say, oh, you're crazy, or that kind of thing, in a very flippant way. It's actually one thing that I relate to, because ever since my bipolar diagnosis, I've definitely become much more sensitive to the word crazy or insane, or like people using bipolar as like an adjective or as like a flippant way of saying, oh, you're just being so hot and cold kind of thing. And I think that's just a matter of like, if you've lived close to mental illness, the flippancy of those words just really feels kind of awful. But I mean, there's always like a time and a place too. I think trying to describe someone else's behavior as crazy just because they're doing something different from you is what bothers me. Whereas if like something really awful or unbelievable happens, I'd be like, oh, that's so crazy, or oh, that's so insane. Like, I'm okay with that. But when you describe someone as like, you know, being crazy for doing some specific thing, like, that's just triggering to me, I feel like, as someone who is actually clinically mentally ill. I don't know if I have anything else to say at this point. I still have half of the book to go. One thing I'm a little worried about is the book like ending on some sort of cliffhanger, because I don't know actually if it's a standalone or if it's a series. And if it's a series, I'm gonna be like really pissed, because like I don't want to wait to know the answer to the mystery. So I'm really hoping that it's a standalone, or that it like wraps up the main mystery of like the castle and the university within this book, because I'm really invested and I want to know. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention is actually the romance is starting to feel like a regular person romance and less like a dark fantasy romance. At the beginning, the author really played up those elements and tried to make it seem like super serious and whatever, but like now they just seem like regular people to me, and it's starting to feel like a regular romance, which I'm actually appreciating. But it's also kind of working against, I feel like, the premise or the marketing for this book, because I had expected it to be more of a dark romance, whereas right now it's more of a mysterious, gothic, creepy book with a kind of hot, forbidden romance. Obviously, there's still more to be learned about our main love interest, because he is still a pretty mysterious guy, and like the main character says multiple times, like she doesn't actually know him that well. Oh, and on that note, one thing that super bothered me, I was so annoyed when this actually came up. So essentially the male love interest, Mr. Deverell Vad, there's a description of him closer to the beginning of the book that basically says he has a streak of gray hair, but he also has like a bunch of other gray hair, salt and pepper look. And so immediately that made me think that he was so much older, and it kind of turned me off, because like I don't really care for the whole salt and pepper gray look. But I started to think that he was super old, and that it was going to be like this situation where he's like immortal or something but looks semi-young, or that he's just much, much older. But then I was like, wait, he's in a PhD, like he's doing his graduate degree and doing his dissertation, so he can't be that old. And then it is revealed that he is only 28, so he's like only 6 years older than the main character, which isn't that big of an age difference. I feel like the book makes it seem like it's such a huge age difference between them initially, so it just adds to the normalcy of the romance, which like I didn't expect, but I'm actually liking. But I'm also like, this was marketed wrong. It's not really a dark romance, it's just a romance that's kind of forbidden, and then a gothic dark book and setting. In some ways, this is reminding me of the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson, which is kind of set in a similar sort of school setting. There's a lot of mystery surrounding like the start of the university and what's going on, and that's very much the case in the Truly Devious series, which is actually a YA series. And let's see, what are my predictions for the rest of the book? I think that there is a very reasonable explanation for why our main guy is the way he is and so mysterious. I feel like he's been maybe cursed some situation going on because of the way it starts and because of the way the book is kind of described as Beauty and the Beast. But yeah, I definitely don't think that he's like actually a bad guy. It's more and more leaning towards him actually being more of a good guy and like not what she initially thought. But yeah, I'm like just so intrigued by the lore and like the backstory of the school and the town and all these murders. So I just want to know what the deal is with all of that. Anyways, I'm gonna finish my makeup because talking and doing it is taking me way too long. I will update you once I am further into the book. Okay, so it's Sunday and I did not end up finishing the book yesterday. I got caught up watching the Olympics, specifically the weightlifting category, because I am just obsessed with tiny women lifting like double their weight above their heads. It's just so impressive, and as someone who goes to the gym regularly and lifts weights regularly, I was just like put in my place. But I was also deeply inspired because I was like, if she can do that, I should be able to do whatever nonsense thing I'm trying to do today. But I did come back to reading late at night and I got past the middle section and into the last third of the book. I'm about 60% through and I have so many thoughts, guys. I think I've gotten to this point where the annoying things or the tropey things that are happening in the book, I've started to sort of tune them out and ignore them because I'm so invested in the mystery and the horror and the supernatural things going on. But this is not to say that I have completely stopped observing all of the weird things that are narrated or said in this book. And so I want to go through that list first. One thing that has been irking me is the way that they call each other like witch and devil. It's supposed to be sexy and like unique, but I'm just like, come on, no one would say that in real life. Number two is how in every single sex scene, there's three things that happen. One, the main character waxes poetic about how she just wants him to like claim her and possess her and own her. And I always am just pulled out of the story because I'm like, girl, get a grip. Number two is how the author seems to have some sort of obsession with the main character's piercing, her nose piercing. She has like a hoop. And in every sex scene and intimate scene that the main character has with the love interest, he ends up kissing her piercing, or there's something said about her piercing, how he touches it, how he kisses it, how he gives attention to it. That is just such an odd kink. Like, your nose doesn't have that many nerve endings. You don't really feel much, so I don't understand the obsession. And the third one is probably the one that irks me the most, and it's that every time the love interest is thrusting into our main character, he is always, without fail, at some point described as punching into her. Like, thrust is a perfectly fine word. Punching his penis into her pussy. What kind of kink does this serve? I am just astonished. So aside from all those things that irk me whenever I see them, the book is getting so much more interesting, and the character relationships are actually starting to flesh out even further, and I am just so invested. Like, I can't look away. There have been some very dark things that have happened, some very spooky things that have happened, which honestly, like, my skin was crawling. I was like so stressed. And there's also an element of the main character starting to doubt her mind and what she's seeing. She's starting to see and hear these things. And I was actually really intrigued by the fact that this book actually touches upon mental illness in a way that I did not expect. I did think it was going to be used in a way that is often done in fantasy, where a character is like mad or mentally ill, but it's actually related to the fantasy element. So they're actually not mentally ill, they're just a sane person being affected by this outside supernatural force, which, as someone with a mental illness, I have bipolar disorder, I personally find it kind of a cop-out and a reduction of what mental illness is. Mental illness is so much more than hallucinations and, you know, unclear actions. It is most often just a battle with your mind every day, which I've never actually seen fully represented in a fantasy book, which, although this book doesn't have that full representation of mental illness that I would love to see in fantasy, it does at least acknowledge the full possibility of mental illness coexisting next to some sort of outside force affecting the mental state of a character. So yeah, in a weird twist of fate, I am actually starting to like this book. Anyways, I've been talking for hours. I did film a video before this, so My throat is definitely hurting. I'm gonna go grab some lunch because it's like 12 p.m. right now, and then I'm gonna sit down with my e-reader and my stylus and continue reading and annotating. I do have to say the annotating has made this experience so much more fun because every time I see something that's like ridiculous, I like circle it and write some snarky commentary on the side, and it's just like so fulfilling. But yeah, wish me luck on these last 300 pages of GOTHIKANA. Hello friends, it is a new day. I finished GOTHIKANA last night, and I am once again going to be eating my words because this book was awful. Although I was looking at the positive side of things and trying to see the silver linings in this book, ultimately even the things that were semi-good or tolerable ended up being stupid by the end, or didn't make sense by the end. And I mean this in regards to like some of the mystery and some of the plot reveals. I will admit that some of the plot twists towards the end definitely got me, but that doesn't mean necessarily that I think overall it satisfied me in a good way or that it completely wrapped up all of the mystery, because as I'll go through in a bit, there are a shit ton of plot holes that this book leaves, and it's sort of explained as, you know, you might not ever get the answers to some things, but like I felt it was just a cop-out. And even if they didn't relate to the original mystery, if they were just meant to be red herrings, there should be some sort of explanation. In addition to that, although I was enjoying sort of the gothic spookiness of the book, it did start to get old in the sense that everyone would know that something bad was going to happen, and yet they would still keep doing all of the stupid things. And don't even get me started on how there's like these multiple disappearances and like deaths and whatever, but the university never like changes their policy or changes the date of this ball. It's just acted as if no one has control over these things, but they do. They could close the school, they could move the date of the ball, they could do all of these things to prevent the suicides that happen, but for some reason none of that is ever explained, and everything is just so convenient. And then on top of that, the mental illness rep, which I was initially like, oh, maybe this could be good, turned out not to be great, and it sort of played into a lot of very typical tropes and sort of representations of mental illness as if it is something so bad and something so to be feared and that no one can live a normal life with mental illness, which is not true. And so with all of this coming together on top of the terrible writing, the awful dialogue, and just the ridiculous romance, I just ended up feeling like this book was a hot mess and really only intended to serve the author's self-inserty desires, writing out this like strange story but not really making any of it make actual sense. What is the sense of time? What is the sense of place? We don't know where this university is. The logic of there not being like cell phones and technology absolutely makes no sense. I feel very bamboozled by the fact that this book was described as a Beauty and the Beast story, because it really is not. And then the fact that this is called a dark academia is just... People need to stop using dark academia as some sort of adjective for spooky stuff going on at an academic setting. That is not what dark academia is. Dark academia is so much more than that. And if anything, it's a commentary on academia as a whole and should involve academia and the privileges and inequalities in academia. I'm going to be going into major spoilers from here on out, so if you don't want to get spoiled for this book, just leave now. But I do want to talk about some of the major reveals and then also get into some quotes from throughout the book that I thought were ridiculous and that we need to go through. So in terms of that dark academia thing and like the murders and stuff, so we have these slayers who basically run these orgies and then pick up people from the town and murder them, but it's never really explained why, and the psychology of it is not really explained why, and it's just sort of painted as these people are evil. And then the whole twist with Jade at the end, I didn't see it coming, but honestly, the whole reasoning of like her being related to Vad and like being obsessed with him and wanting to be with him, even though they're related and it would basically be incest, that was just so weird to me and just felt like such a simplistic answer to everything that was going on. It just comes down to this dumb girl and her jealousy and the fact that she wants to fuck Vad, and he just apparently has a magic penis and everyone wants it. I was just hoping for something a little bit more layered and interesting. I had some other suspects and I was just really annoyed by the fact that we don't get some answers for other parts of the book. Okay, so one major plot hole was Zoe, the character who happened to be Ajax's ex-girlfriend, and she also had a thing going on with Vad. She was from the town and she had disappeared 5 years ago at the last black ball, and it's mentioned in this like really nasty quote that like Ajax and Vad have a threesome with Zoe at the ball because it turns into like this ridiculous orgy. And it's mentioned multiple times that she went missing. And Ajax brings up the fact that Zoe disappears and then his brother commits suicide. And that whole connection isn't really touched upon later. Like obviously Jade was responsible for Troy, but we never come back to the fact of Zoe and what happened to her. And it just had me suspecting Vad even more because Ajax like doubts him multiple times, even though he's been in a threesome with him, which I just found ridiculous. And part of me was just waiting for the other shoe to drop with Zoe, because why didn't the main character even ask Vad about the fact that Zoe disappeared? Like what actually happened to her? Another plot hole that was never resolved was the silhouette in the shack. So when they go to the woods and see the shack, and obviously like the real Jade's body was in there, and then the fake Jade goes and burns it later on. But when they did go see the shack the first time, there was like this silhouette in the shack who was like walking around, and then they all got freaked out and the silhouette was locked inside. And they all run. And later on, when Corvina comes back with Ajax, the shack is unlocked and the silhouette isn't there. But we know that real Jade was killed like 2 years ago and burned a few months ago. So what happened to the silhouette? It's never mentioned. Where did it go? Who was that? Another plot hole that piqued my interest was the mysterious friend that Vad has from the home that he was put in when he was a kid. And this is his dear friend who is never named but died in the fire that took the home. And that is like never explained either. And the fact that it's like named the same thing as the institute that Corvina's mother is in, that's never explained either. And it's overall just super weird that we hear about this character but we never find out what happened to him. And on a similar note, there's also the boy who visited Corvina in the library and like warned her about something. I forget what it was, but that boy is like never recognized later on. We don't hear of him again, and it's briefly mentioned at the end that she never found out what happened with him. And it's just like, why put that in? What was the point of that? And this brings me to the final plot hole that was like never resolved, and that is what happened with the other disappearances. Why was Roy taken into the water and almost drowned? What were those things in the water? And why did we never find out about that? I know in the author's note, the author mentions that like sometimes you just don't get answers for things, but I just feel like there's too many of those things throughout the book to not be answered or revealed as red herrings. Now let's get into some of the other things that I hated about this book and the other quotes that just literally drove me insane. I was like going through all of my highlights and trying to narrow these down to talk about because there's too many. Something pulsed in the air between them, an aura of danger wrapping around him that sent a perverse thrill to her lizard brain. She just knew that if she ran, he would chase. And she wanted him to chase. She wanted him to catch her, conquer her, claim her, and reassure her everything would be okay, that their chemistry, their connection was still the sun while her world tilted on its axis. Girl, I feel like throughout the book she sort of makes him into be everything that her being hinges on. Like he is the one that has changed her entire life. He is the one who has made her accept herself. This is another one from Vad, and let's not forget that his name means untamed. I'm in your head, in your blood, in your very veins. I've claimed you before anything else ever could. Your body, your heart, your mind, your fucking soul. It's all mine. Your hunger is mine to feed. Your madness is mine to tame. Do you feel that? I'm going to touch back on this idea of madness and also how it relates to the schizophrenia rep in this book, which was just ridiculous, but let's get back to this. Look at me, he commanded, and her body complied, her gaze locking with his. I am the grandson of a serial killer. I was raised by him, taught by him. His legacy is mine. His blood is mine. I will never be a good man. But you don't need a good man, do you? You need a devil to fight your demons because you don't want to fight them alone. You're self-sufficient, but you don't want to be. You want that beast on the throne who would take charge for you. The beast who could fuck you raw in a room full of people gone mad and still make you feel safe. Am I wrong? And then we have the perpetual hickey that is on her. Vad loved having that mark on her in a place usually covered just for the two of them to know. A mark of ownership and tenderness so deep it felt bottomless. Was it messed up? Probably. Did she care? Not really. She loved it, thrilled in it, knowing that she was so utterly and completely his. Like, girl, yes, you're a self-aware queen for like a second, and then you're like, yeah, but I don't care. Another sort of tropey thing that always shows up in a lot of the scenes is that he calls her little crow, and then she calls him devil, or the devil of Varenmore, or the silver-eyed devil. That, like, phrase was driving me nuts the entire book, silver-eyed devil. Like, just call him by his name. Just call him by his name. And let's not forget this iconic line, magic eyes, magic pussy, he murmured again, looking all over her face. little witch. Oh, to have magic purple eyes and a magic pussy. Purple eyes thing and the silver eyes thing was just like repeated so many times, like purple met silver when they're just like looking at each other. Like, why? It was just so overly tropey and annoying that it was just so hard not to notice while reading. And at some point it had happened so many times that I just like got used to it that my eyes slid over it. But coming back to like some of these quotes later on, I was like, oh my God, this is like so cringy. If we move on to Vad, which let's not even talk about how dumb a name that is, him having a thesis that was on the correlation and influence of music on literature through the ages, like that's the vaguest thesis statement I've ever heard. No one gets accepted into a master's to do a thesis that fucking vague. Here's one of my favorite quotes from him. "Steer clear of me, little crow," he muttered, his eyes piercing, flaying her open. "You might be a luring siren, but I'm no ordinary sailor. I'm a mad pirate and I'm trying to resist your call. If I land on your shores, I will plunder and take away everything worth having. Be very careful giving me those eyes." I'm no ordinary sailor. I think it's a universal thing that all terrible smut must have the male main character compare himself to some ridiculous thing as a metaphor for how he's going to plunder the main character's pussy. Also, let's not forget him saying he has a vasectomy and her just believing him automatically when they first have sex and not insisting to use a condom. Like, please. One thing about Corvina that really bothered me was like the level of privilege that seemed to be spinning around her, because although she commits her mother to the mental institution, she somehow is surviving on her own. With what money? Where is that coming from? How are you funding your adventures? There's a point in the book where she's like, while studying interested her well enough, she wondered sometimes what exactly she was doing at a university in the first place. She always wanted to be in a school environment with people, but she had never been very ambitious about earning a degree or getting a job. It was a new start, a new chapter for her, but some days she wondered if she wasn't there only escaping for a while before she had to return to the life she had known, if this wasn't simply a bridge between her past and her future. Her passion, her satisfaction had always been in the simple things: reading, making candles and incense, finding crystals, doing readings, being one with nature. But it had become monotonous in her old town, in her old life. Like, girl, please. You had never been ambitious about getting a job? How about the fact that you just need to have a job? And also this idea of like her passion being like the little simple things. Like, yeah, all of us would have passion for all the simple things if we didn't have to work. And this sort of plays into the ending where she ends up not working and he's like supporting her financially. After the tower incident, Corvina had decided to drop her degree and instead spend her time at the institute recovering, reading, and studying what she liked without any academic curriculum. After moving out, she had opened a small business making candles, crafting unique jewelry, and doing online tarot readings. Vad had been extremely supportive of that, telling her to do what brought her peace and pleasure. It's just like this entire vibe of her wanting to be this little princess who doesn't have to do anything for herself. He does everything. He claims her, he possesses her, he owns her, he provides for her financially, and she just gets to sit there and look pretty. And of course, this just plays into the overall self-inserting nature of Corvina's character. The author and like Corvina's narration also has a tendency to use the word masculine a lot. The masculine response from her back made her gasp and spin around. A part of her wanted to break the eye contact and blush furiously at the singular masculine attention from a very masculine man. Can we just appreciate how she has used the word masculine and male 3 times in one sentence? I remember reading this line and just like laughing out loud because it was so dumb. And then of course towards the 3rd act of the book, there is like an extended period of time where they're just like fucking every day. And she basically explains her routine as, her routine was simple. She'd wake up early and go to the library to work on one of her papers for a few hours, after which Vad, all sweaty and hot after his workout, would usually find her in an aisle, push her against the books, and fuck her for the day in the empty library. She'd then go back to her tower, shower, and get ready for classes, hang out with her friends, especially Jade, and help her slowly heal. Can we just appreciate how self-inserty this is? Like, it's just like the author wanted to fulfill all of her fantasies. And then the final, like, cherry on top for this whole self-insert situation is the fact that she starts writing about her experience at the school and her romance with her silver-eyed devil and makes it into an actual book, and it's called GOTHIKANA. The fact that this becomes so meta and so full circle, like the author is writing a self-insert about herself and then the character is writing a self-insert about herself, and it's just like, where does it end? It's just like a series of mirror reflections and you're like, what is going on? Now going back to the idea of madness, and I also want to talk about the schizophrenia rep because these were the most problematic parts to me and it was just so strange. It's meant to seem romantic, but I think it's just sort of flippant in a way. So there's a lot of parts where, you know, they essentially say that their love is basically madness. And she's like, this is different from the madness that I've experienced before, but I like it. There's this line where he's like, you want to know who I am? He punched his hips harshly against her. I slam, am slam, your slam madness. And then they have this thing of like repeating back this like line to each other. So she says, if this is madness, drown me in it. And he says, if this is madness, I've already descended too far. So everything about their relationship and their love and their lust and whatever is sort of explained in the context of madness and sort of death and the afterlife and just all these dark themes. And I get that it's a dark romance, but it's just so creepy and gross. And then also the idea of madness being sort of romanticized in this way was just so stupid to me. And it's also romanticized in the sense of the schizophrenia rep also. So when it's revealed that her mother is schizophrenic and that her father was also schizophrenic and he committed suicide because of his illness, and her mother was basically catatonic the entire time she was raising Corvina, and she was undiagnosed, and Corvina basically gets her committed to this mental institution, and then Corvina herself admits herself to the institution for like a month or so to get checked. And they basically write off the voice in her head, Mo, as like a coping mechanism, and they're like, you're fine. But she is still like so scared that she might become mad or that she's going mad. And it's sort of meant to like connect with the paranormal aspects going on. The visions that Corvina has are never explained. And there's a part where the doctor is like, it could have been her subconscious telling her something, or maybe it's something external, maybe it's a ghost, who knows? And it's just like, what the hell? And beyond the whole representation of like her parents being schizophrenic and basically not being able to live a full life and not ever seeking help, and that being sort of problematic on its own because it just really is reinforcing this general representation of people with mental illness being incapable of receiving proper treatment and sort of healing in a way that they can become functional, and also reinforces this idea that they are incapable of like taking care of themselves either. So beyond that, a lot of the narrative around Corvina's own relationship with her potential schizophrenia or her madness is related to that. And it's like, oh, he accepts me despite the fact that I might be mad. Oh, he loves me as I am. He sees me as I am. And she sort of pins her own personal sense of empowerment and acceptance on the fact that he accepts her. That would be fine if this was like a normal romance, but like honestly, she's just so obsessed with him because like he's the first person who has accepted her. And man is literally like claiming her and possessing her and owning her, and there's that whole element along with this. And so like none of it makes sense. Like she doesn't really have agency over herself. And yeah, there's just this general like boo-hoo, sad, I'm crazy, and oh, I'm so scared I'm gonna end up like my, you know, insane mother who's in an institution. Oh, I'm so scared I'm gonna forget you. And oh, this whole illness is gonna ruin my entire life and I'll never be normal again. And it's such a bad thing. And that's such a reductive sort of view on mental illness. As someone with a mental illness, like it's not all of your being, but it is a significant part of your life and it does affect you in large ways. But like in this day and age, which this is another reason why it makes no sense, this book, because it's not really set in like a specific time or place. There's no sense of that. So like you don't really get if this is like, you know, 2024 or like 2000 or the 90s. Like I wouldn't be able to tell. But there's this element of like in this day and age, there are so many ways to treat mental illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar or whatever, that people can live like very fulfilled, normal lives as long as they are, you know, on medication, going to therapy, doing all of these different things. And obviously that's hard. It's just sort of made to be a character flaw rather than just an aspect of her life. Like this is something she lives with, and it's just treated with so much fear. Like we do not have to fear mental illness. We just need to treat it. So yeah, those are all the quotes that I wanted to talk about. There are so many more that I had to like leave behind because there's only so much I can take when talking about this book. I feel like this was a roller coaster. I went up and down on my thoughts on this, but like overall I knew it was going to be sort of terrible. And while it did intrigue me at one point with the mystery aspects, it just went downhill again. And by the end I was like, oh yeah, this was fairly shitty. I think like partway through I was reading it and I was ignoring all the shitty things, so I was like, oh, maybe this isn't that bad. It's just a really trashy read that's like semi-satisfying, but not. I feel like my brain has rotted dramatically while reading this book, and now I need something with actual substance. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this very long, rambly, and ranty video about Gothikana and romantasy. This ended up being more like romance and like horror than it ended up being fantasy, but that's fine. Let me know what you think I should read for the next romantasy vlog that I do, and please let it be something that's not gonna rot my brain as much as this one. As always, thank you so much to my Binder members for supporting me and my channel and making all of this possible. If you aren't subscribed to my Binder community yet, then definitely go join for the cost of a coffee, and you can get exclusive content from me and also a behind the scenes look on the publishing process with my imprint Boundless Press. Our first book is coming out next spring in 2025, and that book is Dust Settles North by Dina Elganaidi. It is a literary fiction with two characters moving through grief in very different ways, and they are Egyptian American, so there's that representation and just this idea of living between two cultures. It is definitely something that will regrow the parts of your brain that have rotted from reading Gothikana if you did read it, so definitely check it out. I will leave details down below. And with that said, go check out my Instagram and TikTok in the description down below as well, and I will see you in my next video, so please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!